Welcome to the Hay Kings podcast, brought to you by Krone, dedicated to hay and forage growers. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Stefan. Oh, Stefan, how do you say your last name?
Hollmann.
Hollmann. Hey, I can do it.
Yeah.
Ha. So do stick with us here. I promise you, Stefan speaks baler better than most people on the planet, so this will be great. Stefan, tell us where you grew up in Germany.
I grew up on a dairy, which is located in the northwest of Germany. It's basically 800 meters away from the Dutch border. So I technically can walk to another country. So that's where I grew up. It's a small dairy, outside a middle-sized dairy, 120 cows. We farm around 80 hectares. And yeah, that's basically where I've grown up.
Now, today you're in Toowoomba, Queensland in Australia. But that's not, you're spending most of your time in Australia now, not in Toowoomba, but just north of Adelaide, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I've been there now 8.5 years, and I'm only in Toowoomba because I'm actually on a sort of a road trip with a mate from Germany.
Oh, nice.
So he works, he works for a company called Kemper, and he just wanted to do a holiday in Australia. He's been here before, and he said, "Oh, well, I know Stefan down there. Let's go over there and make a combination between vacation and work." So
that's actually my ideal version of a vacation. The farm tours and working. Yeah. How did you get from Germany to Australia? What took you to Australia?
That's a very, very funny story. So before I came to Australia, I've never been anywhere else except Germany and Netherlands. I might have been once in Austria for skiing, but yeah, I did normal school. I went to a farming school afterwards, did my farming apprentice, and then I did a practical-based agriculture master degree. And I always wanted to see more from agriculture and learn more, and never could get enough from it. So, and my parents were like, "Oh, well, maybe you go first to the east of Germany and see how that goes for you. Not straight, to America or Australia or far away." So I did that. And while I was in the east of Germany, I really was interested to go to Australia or New Zealand. And the funny thing is the Krone factory, they're only 40 minutes away from our farm. So I knew actually a few engineers, a few people down there. And I just sent them a few SMS and it's like, "Oh, do you have any contacts in New Zealand or Australia?" Wasn't really fussed where. And then one guy had these contacts, Lars. So that was basically the first phone number I got was Lars' number. They said, "Well, contact this guy. He's a German guy in Australia. He works for Krone and he will help you out." So then I rang him and he sort of got me in touch with Gavin Schuster, where I've been now for 8.5 years. And the first idea was just to come over to do one harvest for maybe 1 or 3 months. I was very, very nervous to do it because I've never been in an airplane. I've never been on an airport. I couldn't speak any English. I might have been able to speak 3 sentences and that's it. So, and that was basically how I got to Australia.
We met at Schuster's. I can't remember the name of the town there.
Freeling.
The Barns at Freeling. It's a wonderful event venue. Here's your free plug, Schuster's. If you're ever in the neighborhood, it is a wonderful, wonderful spot. Schuster's run Krone balers. Let's dive into the baler side of things. Where did you start?
Yeah, so they started, before I started working for them, they had actually another German guy there for, I believe it was 6 months. And that was the time they sort of started getting the Krone balers. So I came in 2016, and if I'm not wrong, I think the first Krone baler on their farm might have been 2-3 years before that. That was a time when Krone really started getting going in that area. Before that, it was mainly dominated from Massey Ferguson. I think they said to Krone when they had the first Krone baler, "Oh, do you have any German guys who would be interested to come over?" That's how it all sort of started. They were interested to get people from Germany as well. So they kicked off with the Krone balers, and then I came, and I actually never driven a Krone baler before I came to Australia.
Oh,
that was quite funny.
And they didn't care.
And now here we're sitting, and 8 years later, and God knows how many bales I've done. I lost count after 100,000, I think.
Oh boy,
But
I'd imagine.
I mean, there's a lot of corn hay equipment around my area, due to the factory only being 40 minutes away from the farm. But yeah, baling jobs in my area in Germany is usually done by contractors because you can't afford the machinery because the farms are not that size. Yeah, so when I came to the Schusters, they were running 2 balers on their own, and we had 1 in share, so technically 3 balers. That was sort of, my first job, so I got introduced to that, and yeah, it's now one of my favorite jobs to do.
Did you start with Gen 4 Krone balers?
Yes, we started with them with a 1290 HTP, and then later you had the HTP Extreme, and now we are running the Gen 5s.
Remind me which of those has 6 knotters versus 8 knotters.
So they are all 6 knotters. We never run the 8 stringers like the HTP2.
Mm-hmm.
We're not running them because they're not fitting into our system. Because, well, you've seen it, the easy bale sort of side we're running. And because of that, we can't really use the 8 stringers because they've got too high densities, or they're running most of the time less flakes than the 6 stringers.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we like our 6 stringers.
Tell me what you like about the balers, and then tell me where you've had some problems. And then I happen to know that you have the ear of folks that listen at Krone on development. Is there anything that you've helped develop?
What I like about the Krone, their first point would be the pickup. I reckon it's one of the best pickups on the market because, so the place where we bale, I've baled with speeds in the fields from anywhere 1.5 kilometers per hour up to 25 to 30 kilometers per hour. Australia has really rough conditions. We got really rough fields. We got very dusty conditions. So, and the pickup maintenance side, or like, the money we spend, if you just look on the pickup to fix it up after the season, is not much. And it just survives sort of everything you do with the baler. It doesn't matter what speed you do. It doesn't matter, what kind of product you swallow with the baler. It just works. It's just, I reckon that's one of the biggest advantages baler has.
A little conversion there. That's like 15 or 18 miles an hour on the top end.
Yeah, it's quite fun. It's a big speed, but like last harvest, we had it really dry in South Australia. So for example, I'm usually baling anywhere between 14 to 16,000 bales per season on my own. And the last season, I just did 5,000. So just to give you a perspective how dry it actually was.
It was really bad. Yeah.
So yeah, really bad. So we had some Krone guys actually out in the field, and they looked at us and was like, "What you guys doing here?" And we was like, "Baling." Yeah, why are you baling? We was like, "We're baling this store here." Or like, "What store?" So you hardly could see the windrows, but we still sort of baled it because you got to see it that way. The store we don't bale and don't get at our place. We got a cart from further away to get the bale numbers we need to have. So it's sort of a calculation if it's worth it or not. And yeah, they were just amazed with what speed we were in a paddock and how the balers were handling it. And, the pickup is still picking up, even if you bale sort of, I would say, half a bale to the acre.
Oh, yeah.
The pickup is still picking it up at 20 k's an hour. So that's why I always say it's quite amazing what they can achieve with their pickup.
I like the way that Australians sometimes pretend to be super metric and modern in their measurements, but acres are still in there.
Yeah, well, that's because, I've never talked about acres and inches and stuff before I came to Australia, because Germany is purely metric. But the funny thing is, when I came here first, one farmer talks the whole time about acres and inches, and then, the next minute, all of a sudden, he talks about hectares and meters. And it's like, well, what you're actually using? I'm like, oh, both.
Well, it depends on what you're doing, right? They'll use, liters per hectare for spray herbicide applications.
Yeah.
And then when you're baling, you're talking about bales per acre, tons per acre, but it does go back and forth quite readily.
I would say the very old generation, like, for example, Gavin's dad, he talks about more like acre, bale to the acre. And we talk probably more bale to the hectare, but it's just backwards and forwards. It's depending who you talk to.
It actually made my travels there easy because most folks could think in acres, and then all I had to do was make the 10% jump from metric tons to short tons.
Yeah, well, luckily we don't go up and down with that. So we stick to tons and kilograms. Yeah. We don't jump up and down to that.
Right. Metric tons, 2,200 pounds for anybody that doesn't know. You love the pickup header. Take me through the VFS.
I reckon it's a really good system, especially now with the 5th generation. They did some really good updates. So it's now all electronically controlled. You sort of can, with a previous model, in the easy bale, we want to have a bale with 40 flakes. And sometimes if you don't have enough material, it's very hard to achieve that number, because you're just going to drive slower or faster. And I mean, there's on a VFS, there's a spring you can adjust on the old balers which helps you to feed the VFS to get your bale numbers, flake numbers.
Sure.
Now it's all electronically controlled from the cap. So you got in the back of a VFS, you got like the rougher. So that one triggers the VFS to push a flake in the chamber. And you can sort of adjust the point. When is that point that the rougher tells the VFS to push the flake into the chamber? So you can adjust that a little bit depending on how much material you're feeding into the baler. Makes it a lot easier for us if we want to bale just that 40 flakes in good condition bale.
So you can dial in, and the baler makes the adjustment how many flakes. Instead of
no, not quite that. They can't do that just yet. It would be nice if you can do that, but they're not quite there.
I'm familiar with an older Heston where you have to get the spring pressure right on the door at the bottom of the pre-chamber to get your flake count. That's your adjustment for your flake count. But you're saying it's easier with the Gen 5 balers.
Oh yeah, like if you want to make any changes on the VFS, you do that from the cap now. It's all
much
easy
better.
To control. Yeah, it's much better. And the beauty about the VFS is I think you get the compaction inside the flake. If you look to other balers, the same sort of rougher arm, which is pushing the flake into the chamber, is sort of trying to pre-compact the flake in itself. While the VFS has got don't get me wrong, 4 or 5 rows of forks, and one fork is only responsible for shifting the flake in your chamber. And the other 4, they're just pre-compacting it in a pre-chamber before it gets lifted up. And I think that's the biggest benefit from that system, because you get the density in the bale and always very square bales. It doesn't matter how much material you're feeding into the baler. If the VFS says, I haven't got enough material in my pre-chamber to lift it up, it just does another round to get more material in there to finish the flake and lift it up. And other systems don't have that. So you always have, doesn't matter how dry your material is, how wet, how, the amount of the material, you always get really nice square bales.
No other square baler has a bigger appetite for the most demanding conditions than Krone HDP2 Big Pack. 8 knotters put more hay on every bale, and a new V-knotter design makes hanging on the bell hook almost impossible, requires fewer adjustments, and leaves no scraps behind. See it all at krone-na.com. Krone machines, built for generations.
I was just down at a baler school in Oregon, shout out Jesse Bounds, and they had a Massey sitting next to a Krone, and one thing that was really obvious was the length of the bale chamber. The Krone is much longer.
Oh yeah, of course. The length of a chamber is critical in your density of the bales, of course. But in the same time, like your length of your chamber, the pressure you can create, and I would say what kind of gearbox you have, because you want to have a strong machine. That, the more force you put on the bale or on material, the stronger or the heavier the machine should be, because otherwise you start getting issues.
Right. What knot strength twine are we talking about?
I think we talked about that the other day. I think the plunger, if you run your baler on 180 bar and 100%, you're talking about 50 to 60 tons of force what they can create.
Yeah, that's a lot. And as we think about what you want to accomplish when you're baling, you're trying to deaden the cell membrane. If we think about the cell structure of those plants, cells are round. Every picture you've ever seen, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Every cell that you've ever seen is round. That means it's kind of springy and it resists deformation. And when you get that much force from that plunger, and of course you don't always run it at 180 bar, and that's the pressure on the hydraulics, and then at 100% load on the plunger. But when you are running it at that, you're crushing those cells within the plant, deadening the springback capacity of that cell membrane. So those are the kind of things that we're thinking about in that bale formation, and particularly density.
It's quite interesting because you in America, you mainly do grass high and lucerne high, aren't you?
Mostly, but there's straw and corn stover, and yeah, there's a wide variety of things that are baled. But yeah, grass hay and lucerne, alfalfa.
Well, it's really interesting here because it's really unique because we do hay from wheat and oats, which is really unique because most, locations on the earth, you can't even do it because you just don't have enough heat in the weather to dry the knots of the plant. If you look at the wheat plant, it's hollow from the inside. And if you bale the bale from wheat, it creates that much force that the plant is afterwards completely flat. So that's very interesting because it's hollow on the inside, and you see that effect a lot more in a wheat crop or in straw than you do in grass high, because obviously ryegrass hasn't got much of a hole inside the plant. And that just shows you all that force is just flattened, and you especially see that in at the HTP2, the 8 stringers, because there's so much more material that can, take inside the baler, and they're creating so much more force. It just flattens the material. Well, you imagine getting 60 tons of pressure on that smaller area.
Yeah. The cross section on a 3x4 is not that. Oh, sorry. I misspoke. They're 8x4x3s. In Australia, we would just call them a 3x4.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Now it's very unique what we do here. Like I said, like in Germany, there would be no way that you could dry a wheat crop making hay from it. They just do whole crop silage from it. But yeah, and that's why it's very interesting for baler companies to come here and test their balers, because we're running them very, very hard. We're running them to the limit. We're looking after our machinery, but we're just trying to use everything we can use out of the machine, what they're built for. And we want to have these high density because in high, we like to have the maximum technically what you want to have in a high bale is 650 kilo. Because once you exceed that, you technically have to take bales off the trucks because they will be overloaded. You can easily achieve that with the crown balers. And, if you go to other places in the world, they would take pressure off and bale the hay looser. They're not used to bale it. They're not going after tonnage, after kilogram, and everything in Australia is tonnage because the distances between farms and,
it's all about density. Yeah. You said 650 kilos in a bale. That's about 1,430 pounds. But that's oaten hay, that's barley hay, that's wheat hay. That's not something that's decidedly not alfalfa or lucerne that packs much tighter, right? Your expectations on a lucerne bale might be close to a ton in some cases.
I don't know a ton, but you definitely, look, if you have a HTP2, for example, you can achieve 750, 800 kilo in a oaten hay bale or in a wheaten hay bale with 14% moisture. You can achieve that.
That's 1,750 pounds with the HTP2.
Yes, you can achieve that.
In oaten hay.
Yeah.
With my antique baler, I can't get that much lucerne in a bale.
Well, we bought 2 truckloads of wheaten hay the other day from another farmer, and they were HTP2 bales. And he told us he told us they were around 600 kilograms, but they were actually 750 kilo. So, and it was baled dry, so there was not a hell of a lot of moisture in the bales.
1,650 pound wheat bales. That's really heavy.
And they're for reference, they're usually around the 2.35, 2.4 meter long, just as a reference point. Because, I mean, you can make a bale 3 meter and say, well, my bale is a ton.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, you said you've baled north of 100,000 bales, which means you've broken a baler along the way. What's the worst breakdown you've had on a baler?
Oh, the worst breakdowns. Luckily, not very bad ones, what I've heard what other people had. Luckily, never say never. But I think, what's the worst? That's a very good question. I think I would say the worst was the feeding rotor just snapped, like the older Gen 4 models, so the shaft coming in from the rotor used to have a little weak point because they had a step-down shaft. It was bigger in the diameter on the inside, I believe it was, than the outside. And there was a time they had a bit of issues with that, I think, and it just snapped, but it didn't break anything else. So you were just baling, and then all of a sudden it wasn't driving anymore. Like, it just stopped. So it wasn't causing any other issues. It was nothing dramatically. All they had to do is taking the rotor out and put a new one in. I mean, it was very costly, but yeah, I have heard of people, they had the people that are driving HTP2 balers, they had all of a sudden the main shaft, which comes out of the gearbox, snapped off and fall into the VFS. So I believe you don't want to have anything like that, because I think the HTP2 is around the 12 to 14 tons what it weighs. And if something like that happens and they tell you the baler is jumping around like a trampoline, if a machine which weighs 14 tons and something like that happens, yeah. I've heard about that. Don't know why. Probably weak material. I do not know. But yeah, luckily I never had.
You've only heard that story once, I'd imagine.
Yeah, not very often. So
yeah,
I don't. Yeah.
The all-new Krone Gen 5 Big Pack Large Square Baler gives you outstanding reliability and serviceability. The completely updated VFS makes serviceability easier, faster, and more economical. Talk with your local dealer to learn more about Krone machines built for generations.
Have you baled a set of needles?
What was that?
Have you baled the needles? Broken the needles off?
No, I didn't do that because the 6-stringers did not have that issues. I believe that the 8-stringers had that for a while, and it was only a little spring. It was like a spring, I think, the length of your thumb, and that snapped, and that was confusing the needles. And when the needles were coming up, the plunger was baling them up. I've seen that, but that was only at the HTP2, not at the 6-stringer, so I never did that.
Oh, if I told you that my small 3-tie baler is sitting out here with 3 broken needles, you would feel sorry for me, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, like, every machine breaks down, every machine has issues, and especially, balers are such a high wearing machine, and there's lots of things going on. And I think the most difficult part on a baler is the nodder. It takes you a while to, understand the system and be able to fix it yourself. But yeah, you get better and better the more bales you do, I think.
How many bales did you have to bale before you knew how to fix the knotters?
I reckon.
And would you say that you can just fix a knotter today? Like, if something's not tying, can you go and make the adjustments?
It's funny, when I started, when I had issues, I always tried to, you get a screwdriver or something. If you have like a leftover knot stuck on the bill hook and stuff like that, you just try to go in there with a screwdriver and get it out somehow. Well, nowadays it's completely different. I would just unscrew the knotter, unscrew like a bolt, like the tension from the bill hook and all that sort of stuff, because I roughly know what's the factory setting to set it back where it has to be. But years ago, I didn't know that, so I didn't want to stuff around with anything or confuse any settings. And I think just get better on that. Every time I had another issue when a mechanic came out, I always try to be at the baler and watch and ask questions what he does. I always find that very helpful. Be there when the mechanic comes and fixes the baler, and not like, the baler's in the paddock, I will go home and have lunch. That helped me a lot. And just, trying different things. And when the bill hook breaks down and this time I can fix it myself. And then, I stuff that up. And then I have to ring the mechanic and he helps me to fix it over the phone, like things like that. I think it took me 2 or 3 seasons at least to get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but
there is hope.
I reckon it's getting easier as well. Like fixing the machine. Now we've got for example, the tileless knotter on one machine, and there's just less things on there, and it's the knotter is more forgiven. Like if you, for example, if you set up the bill hook tension, for example, you have to turn that one nut 1/3 turns. If you would do it like 1/2 turn, it will still work. So it's more forgiven for mistakes you do.
Now, what you're talking about is the V knotter that ties
That's
a
correct.
regular first knot, and then the second knot, the little tag, the tail that's usually left on the bale, is incorporated into the second knot.
That's right.
A little point of clarification here, and I heard this described. If you're new to big balers, the first and second knot have nothing to do with any one bale. It has to do with the stroke of the needle coming up and delivering the twine, because the knotter ties a knot on the way up. That's the first knot. And then as the needle comes back down, it ties a second knot. That's the vocabulary, the first and second knot, as you're working on big balers.
Yeah, so basically the first knot is the finishing knot from the previous bale, and the second knot is the start from the next one. So that's how it technically works. And you always used to have little tails left over, which were created after the second knot, and the V knotter now fixes that. You don't have any little plastic tails flying around the knotter stack and flying all over the paddocks. And yeah, now it's a good system. I mean, the knotter is more expensive. You still have the options running the older knotter, but the biggest benefit from that knotter, what I have found running it now for 2 seasons, is it doesn't matter what kind of twine you put in it, it will tie a knot. Like the older double knotter, which is the same as on a messy baler, for example. It was, soon if you changed the twine, it was playing up. So it didn't like different type of twines. Yeah, when we got first the Gen 5 baler with that V knotter, every farmer has probably 2 leftover bolts of that twine, then half a pallet of that twine, because they had someone coming around. Oh, you should try this twine, you should try this, you get that pallet for free. So as usual, we had a fair few different types of twine lying around, and I thought, I would just try how it goes. And it doesn't matter which one I put in there, it just tied a knot.
What strength of twine are you using?
So we actually changed, was it 2 years ago? So there was a new technology available. I think it took them around 8 to 10 years to develop these new twine. And what it is, it's like it's stretch technology. I don't know how to explain it, but they say if you bale a 2.4 meter long bale, or if you want to have a 2.4 meter long bale and you bale, for example, barley straw, which is really spongy, you should actually set your baler on 2.3 meters or 2.25 meters, because after you bed, this twine actually stretches. So there's actually kind of a stretch technology in it. And I reckon it sounds really weird. I reckon it works, because since we're using that twine beforehand, we always had to be very careful baling barley straw. We had to take a bit of pressure off, because we found that the beds were sort of exploding because the twine couldn't hold it. I mean, everyone knows that who's driving a baler. That's why the 8-stringers were always more an advantage baling barley straw and very spongy stuff. Because the 2 extra strings. But now with that new twine, I think the first year we used it, I've baled all our barley straw nearly with full pressure and hardly had any bonks.
I know just what you're talking about in really dry, grassy material. The bale comes out, hits the ground, and then whichever string has the shortest tail on the knot, it pops first, and then all the other ones go right along with it, and the bale blows up.
And you probably know that, if you don't drive straight over the window and you feed the baler more on the left side than on the right side, and we call them Australia banana bales.
No, we use the same vocabulary, banana bales.
Yeah, so even with that string, you just look in your cameras, because we've got cameras on the back of the balers, and you just think, this is not going to hold up. This is just going to explode. And no, they don't. They just hold together. It's just, don't ask me how they're going to do this twine or how they managed to do it. But since then, we're purely using that brand now. I believe that it's quite funny with the twine companies. I think if you have written down on the twine board Krone or other company's name, I think they all come from the same factory anyway. So that stretch technology should be available at different companies. But yeah, I don't know where we're getting it from. But it's definitely, it's more expensive. But if you calculate the time you're spending stopping because you've got a broken bale, the wastage of the twine, the time to spread it out, to rebale it, I think it's worth it. Because I think we did like a rough number once. It cost nearly, if you calculate like really everything, it costs you nearly $200 to rebale a bale. By the time you come with a loader, spread it out, go with a tractor to the paddock again, rebale it, or you got the risk of getting rain because you moved on with your balers to a different paddock. It costs a lot of money. So if you can stop that, brilliant. Like I've since we run that twine and the V-Nodder, I think I had a time that I did nearly 10,000 bales and only went 5 times off the tractor because of any issue.
In 10,000 bales, you climbed the ladder 5 times.
Yes.
That's a good number. I can think of hours where I climbed the ladder 5 times.
Yes, it gets very frustrating if that's happening. It can happen. It can be like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy, I bet you've had days like that too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. You always have to have your machines in good conditions. Make sure that you spend the money on pre-season if your dealer says, "Oh, you got to replace this." So we always like to spend the money on the start of the season. So if the dealer comes to us and says, look, there's parts 75% worn. So the dealer looks over the machine. He makes us a list and tells you, well, this part is worn 50%, this part is worn 75%. And we are more like the people who say, no, we rather spend the money now before we start in the season because we don't, or we can't afford, or we don't like it to stop doing the season. Because as you know, the weather is so unpredictable nowadays, and we have to bale, for example, if we bale our hay for easy bale, we want to have the moisture between 11 and 14%. To achieve that in the climate we are in is not very easy. So you sometimes only have a window at night where you can bale for that particular parameters for like 1 or 2 hours. You're not getting much done. And if you have a breakdown exactly then, yeah, it's just, you can't afford to do that.
I believe it. The saying I would use is you can pay now or you can pay right in the middle of harvest when you're in a panic.
Yeah.
And that's
right. So
there's 2 options. The one right now when you have time is a good one.
You got to have a good brand, you got to have a good baler, but the baler is only as good as the service and how the farmer looks after it as well. So it's just a combination of these 3 things. You know, to say, oh, I did 10,000 bales because I run a Krone baler. I would say because I look after the machine, spend the money on it before the season, and don't do stupid things with it.
Stefan, I look forward to having you back for part 2 of this interview.
Yes, thanks for having me.